right, 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. Let's say you're walking down the street, Robin, and you're walking next to somebody from another planet. They just came to Earth just to visit, and you don't have a car or anything, and all of a sudden your alien friend bumps his toe and has a gash and needs to go to the hospital, and so, that's a bad example. But anyway, let's just use this. So then you pull out this device. He's never seen this thing called a cell phone, and hey, what are you going to do? He says, well, I'm going to call my father, see if I can borrow his car. And are you sure that will get to your father? Yes, I can get to my father with this, no problem. Will your father let us borrow the car? Well, that I can't tell you, right? And so it's kind of the same way with prayer, right? When you pray to God, you're kind of confident the prayer will get to him, but you don't know whether he's going to answer the prayer the way you want it answered, right? When I was younger, I worked in a lot of factories, and they were noisy, and I didn't want to be there. And I guess I could have prayed, could you please, make me win the lottery? I don't even think the lottery existed back then. But what I said, this is actually a prayer I said, could I just have a job where I work with people instead of machines? And I'm telling you, it was like in no time at all that I started. I had a job at a juvenile detention center. I had a job. Well, radio was working with people constantly, right? I had a job at an assisted living facility, in a restaurant working with people. It was just, it was like almost overnight. That prayer was answered in that way. Huh. Tim Potter, you bring us some great guests, and Tim is here. Tim is with, I always make sure I look at this so I say it right, the First Church of Christ Scientist. Yes. And there's a comma there. And I have so many questions always about this. And you have invited a very established guest, good word, Tony Lobl. Am I saying you're right?
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
Your name right? Yeah. And you are a Christian Science practitioner, and you are going to be at the church on...
The Appleton.
At the Appleton.
Museum.
Tomorrow at the Appleton, right? At 2 o'clock? Mm-hmm. All right, excellent. And you're going to be giving a program called Prayer That Transforms Us, like the one I prayed.
Yeah.
Break out of boxed-in thinking. Good morning, Tony. Good morning, Tim. Good morning to both of you.
Nice to see you.
Good morning, Larry.
Yeah, thank you for coming in, and forgive me for such a long intro, but I wanted to tell that little personal story of mine. So.
Yeah. Well, I have to confess right from the get-go that I have never prayed for an alien. So I don't. I can't say from experience whether that prayer would work or not.
Well, I was trying to use the phone as a way, let's say he was doubting that the phone would work. Some people doubt that prayer will work, and while you might, let's say you don't doubt that prayer works, you might doubt that God will answer it once He gets the message.
Yeah.
Well, that could happen, right?
I mean, that's a really good point. I think that and in fact, that's exactly what I'm hoping to clarify to some little degree tomorrow with our talk on prayer that transforms us, because I think the key issue that we're all asking through that kind of question is, there's so many different definitions of what prayer is. What kind of prayer is it that actually does bring us a sense of confidence that there can be an answer to prayer? Like that experience you shared was beautiful. That heart's yearning to have something that brought you into contact to people, that to me is a yearning to be loving.
In my little stupid metaphor, if the alien was to say, well, how does that thing work? My answer would be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Same thing with prayer. If somebody said, well, how does it work? I don't know. I don't really know how it works. But with Christ Scientist, we run into a lot of stuff all the time. We have listeners who challenge our beliefs and everything. And one time I had this challenge. Do you believe in God or science? And I thought about it, and I said, well, I guess both. I mean,
sure.
if the weatherman who's using science tells me it's going to rain, I believe him.
Uh-huh.
And if God tells me I'm going to die one day and I got a choice, I'm going to believe him.
And I flew here on an airplane. I'm really glad there are scientists who know how to put it all together and make sure it flies. And so I have great confidence in the aspects of science that help us build these amazing things, including the smartphone your alien was trying to use.
But I may wonder where the strange accent came from. We flew him over here from London, so he is London.
Oh, I remember reading that on the promo.
Yes.
Was it me who read it? One of us read that thing.
You read it.
So do you like the weather over here?
I love the weather.
Have you been here before?
I haven't been to this part of Florida, but I've been to
Disney
more
World?
along the coast. And,
on the coast.
Various towns, cities. Yeah.
So do you have a story? I mean, do you have a story? Were you like a drug addict or something?
Actually, I was addicted to gambling, not drugs.
Gambling?
Yeah. I was a gambling addict for several years.
Listen to this, Robin. Listen to him.
Yeah. Well,
love gambling.
actually, that was exactly how I first really tested out this prayer. I've got another story which I'm going to be telling at the lecture about this whole journey into prayer. But my background was I was brought up in a Jewish family, and so I had some sense of a God in my life from that.
Right.
But what I needed when I kind of lapsed from the Judaism before I ever found Christian Science. So it wasn't that kind of a conversion or anything, but it was a sense of going into this habit, this gambling habit, which I started by winning. That's a real problem. If I started by losing, I probably would have never got addicted. but I kept winning at first, and then I got it became a habit, and went to university, and there were more exciting things to do, so it got subdued, came out of university, got a paycheck, and I started gambling that paycheck away every week. And this went on for a couple of years.
How did you pay your rent?
Well, I was living at home.
Oh, you were living at home? Okay.
And the thing is, my family never knew I had this habit precisely because of that. I was at home, I was getting meals, but
okay.
I wasn't saving, I wasn't spending, I was just gambling. And so you need something to break that kind of rhythm of your life, which to me is something spiritual. And I didn't consciously know that at the time, but what happened was someone did introduce me to Christian Science, and by introducing me, I don't mean they took me to church or anything. I was just given a copy of the book Science and Health with Key to Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, which is a key text that Christian Scientists use alongside the Bible. And that's a whole other story, because I was pretty anti-religion, anti-Bible at that time. So someone gave me this book, and on most of the pages there's some reference to the Bible, to Jesus or something like that.
Yeah.
And what it gave me was a different sense of what God is, one that could actually make sense to me. My degree at university was mathematics, so I had this sense of wanting things to be logical. And this book has this incredibly sort of logical progression of ideas which explain the nature of God as not only love and spirit and life and truth, which are all in the Bible. It says God is life, God is spirit, but also as divine principle and mind, divine mind. And this idea of God as divine principle meant there was a consistency to God, and that prayer was about me discovering God, not about me persuading God to be something or do something or change in any way.
Right.
And that makes sense to me, because if God exists, we don't need to tell him to love us. We don't need to tell him to be good to us. We just need to wake up to how to connect with that goodness and that love.
What a revelation for you and for all of us when we get to that point. The nature of mankind is that we are going to demand something logical. That's the way God made us.
Yeah.
We want to see something logical.
Exactly.
And at the same time, before we become grown-ups, when we're children, we accept things, and that's one of the things in the Bible. I'm horrible at quoting the Bible, but I know that Jesus said somewhere along the line that the faith of a child, or
Oh yeah.
So it's just, I don't think you need it to be explained. It's kind of like the cell phone. If you just use it, you're fine. But a guy like you want to know exactly how does this work.
Yeah, but that quality of faith is absolutely key.
Trust,
to trust, that confidence, that conviction. And that childlike confidence in that divine parent is a huge part of my prayer.
And it's guys like you who can help us, those of us who are demanding a logical explanation. Explain God to me with logic. Those guys, like yourself, really are necessary, because God made us wanting that information. It's just the way we saw this movie called Case for Christ. I don't know if you saw this movie a couple weeks ago, and it's it's not going to blow away Star Wars or anything like this, but it's basically a story about a guy who didn't believe at all, wanted to prove there was no such thing as God or as Jesus, and decides with his research that there is, but he had to see evidence, he had to see scientific proof, and the movie makes the case that he did.
Well, to me, my whole experience of God is the logical, progressive understanding, but it's also revelation. I don't discount the fact that God is communicating to us, and sometimes we can just have a breakthrough thought which just gives us this clear sense of God. And that's, to me, what's brought healing in my life, is those moments when your thought just shifts from this sort of constant acceptance that the material experience we seem to have is the limit of our experience, to suddenly feeling this transcendent sense of, actually, I can feel God's love.
Tim, you know what I've noticed about the guests you bring us? When we talk about religion, we talk about religion this side of death. In other words, how to live your life.
Yes.
And I'm not discounting religious experts who come in here, but not unusual for them to talk about the other side of life after we die. And I'm not saying you don't talk about that either. It's just interesting how your church seems to be more focused on where we are right now.
And the nowness of the truth.
Yeah.
And showing
Am I picking up on something that is one of the reasons why maybe you're there in the first place?
For sure.
Because it's about life, right? I used to say this to the guys who would talk to me about life after death, you're going to be saved and all this, and I would say, can we wait? I mean, I was like 20 years old. Can I wait a little? Now I'm 62. Okay, now let's talk about it a little bit.
But you see, that's the logic of Christian Science, isn't it? Is why would you believe someone telling you what's going to happen then if they can't prove it now? You know, that's what I love when I read Science and Health, and when it kind of opens the Bible to me in a new way, which brings the nowness of that goodness of God, because that's what it's saying. Is if it's going to be then, if God is unchanging, then surely that God is God now. We're not having to wait. But I have confidence that life goes on after that transition we call death. But part of my confidence is because I feel I'm already getting on and proving it with these healings, with these experiences where I feel the touch of that divine love right in our present experience.
You are listening to a very handsome guy coming to visit us from London.
With a great personality.
Great personality. And he will be at the Appleton Museum tomorrow at 2:00. And he is Tony Lobl, by the way. He is a guest of the First Church of Christ Scientists right here in Ocala. And you guys flew him in, huh? Did you get on United, by the way? Were you flying United?
I fly Virgin Delta. I flew United internally though on the day that whole.
Oh, you did? Oh, you did?
And my thing was, there are issues to solve here, but my job is to love every person in the United Airlines staff.
Do you know, coupling God with that story, I thought if they asked me to get off the plane, I'm going to get off. Because if that plane crashes, I'm going to say, thank you, God. So I'm so sorry for the other people, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
One of the most wonderful things about you, Tony, is that you're very conversational and you evoke this warmness about you. So will you be having questions after your lecture so people can approach you and speak to you directly?
Yeah, we can have some live questions, or I can talk one-on-one to people afterwards. Absolutely.
What is the biggest resistance you find from people? You said you were Jewish. Is the Christ part of it a resistance?
You know what? I think the biggest resistance is at the end of the day, when we're talking about Christian Science and the relationship to God, what we're trying to prove and uncover is that our life here and now is not this limited material sense of things we have, but we actually are spiritual. And the resistance is that we've got so stuck in these modes of thinking that the brain is the sort of source of thought and the body is the source of life. Whereas what we're saying through our understanding is actually God is our life for every one of us.
Yeah.
And so we meet resistance actually not only kind of out there, but within ourselves. Sure. We've all been brought up with these pictures of what life is made up of. And I love the fact that Christian Science constantly makes you question on a daily basis all the sort of
Isn't it amazing, really,
assumptions,
the life around us? I was looking at something, I think it was a glass of water. If you get a glass of water out of the ocean, there are more living organisms in that glass of water than there are people on the earth.
Right.
Isn't that amazing? You think about that. I mean, this is just a planet filled with life.
Well, a thing that was exciting to me in my senior year of high school was the concept that man is not just a miserable sinner working from the gutter up, and that man is spiritual.
Yeah.
It's the idea of God, a suggestion of that oneness with God. It was really interested me and put me on an entirely different course.
And actually, if I can follow up on that, that was the model that I suddenly began to be introduced to through Science and Health and the Bible when I was struggling with that gambling addiction. And so it gave me not only a different model of how to behave, but actually a different model of who I actually am. Mm-hmm. And as I began to really feel the Spirit moving me to be more focused on loving than on self-indulgence,
Right.
it just lifted me out of that gambling habit. And this is actually over 30 years ago now, and I've never even been tempted to gamble once. It's not like I'm struggling to stop myself gambling. It's just been lifted out of my sense of my identity. And that's freedom to me. It's when you're not just managing the symptoms, but you're actually, you've been transformed. Hence the title of the lecture.
In your transformation lecture, are you able to emit to people that they have to admit this not only to themselves, but to others, and not to be embarrassed by it?
I have some compassion on people who are embarrassed by it, because I've felt that at times. So you don't want to, and sometimes, the Bible does say not to cast your pearls before swine, and not that other people are swine, but just that sense of if the thought's not wanting to go there and ready to go there, that's not always the place you need to share that. But you keep your heart open to share, so that when that sincere heart, that childlike heart reaching out for an answer
Right.
is there, you feel the Spirit moving you to share, and to share through love. It isn't about conversion to me or proselytizing. It's about, there are ideas here that can help you, that can heal you, and I'm willing to share them with you. I'm wanting to share them with you, and if you're open to that, let's talk.
Mrs. Eddy says that when the heart speaks, no matter how simple the words, its message is always heard by those who have hearts. And that was a very liberating concept for me when I gave public talks.
Say that again. When
the heart speaks, no matter how simple the words, its message is always heard by those who have hearts.
Oh, nice.
And so it's the heart that's
Heart
that
to heart,
love.
heart to heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's that love that.
Yeah.
I worked at, I mentioned I worked at a juvenile detention center, and one of the nights I was there was a night shift. I caught the shadow of a kid. I was walking room to room to make sure the kids were asleep, and one kid wasn't asleep. And he was, when I say kid, he was almost 18, I guess. And he was up, and I want to keep an eye on him. So I kind of stood there, and I could see like a shadow, and I'm thinking, he's doing something in there. And I opened the door, and he was getting ready to hang himself with a sheet. And I sat with him, and I said, I'm not a great person to preach the Bible, but I believe there's a God, and I believe there's a way for you to live your life. You know there's only one day that we die?
Yes, exactly.
You could live another 99 years, and then that last day, then you die, But otherwise, God's going to get you through every single day.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. And I don't know if it helped or not.
Well, I think that's...
But I took the sheet away from him, too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's practical common sense, yeah. But what a beautiful thing, your spiritual intuition, to keep you alert to that. I mean, what was telling you that? It has to be something beyond just...
Oh, an interesting thought, yeah. I didn't think of that.
And that's, again, something that I think the practice of a spiritual faith, I mean, to me, Christianity and Christian Science are the faith I practice, but it should enhance that spiritual intuition in us, that we do have moments like that. There's no logical reason you should have felt that night. Something was telling you that, and to me, that's a Christ, bringing that kind of insight, inspiration, beyond what the material senses can see, but it knew, and it told you, you listened, and what a result. What a beautiful result.
Will you be there Saturday also, Tim, that
yes.
in case people come to the lecture?
Yes, we're hoping
to
to get
hear
some
Tony.
students also from the college. I was over the other day talking to a couple of the professors that have religion classes, and they have mentioned that students who want to get extra credit can come over and hear the talk. But yes, we'll be there, and we'll have some literature and some science and health and Bibles that people can take if they would like to. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and the more the merrier.
Tony, have you written a book?
I write a lot, but not books. I write articles.
Okay.
I've been published online by the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, and the Guardian.
I would love to read what you write.
Great, okay.
It sounds like something I'd like to know more about you. How did you find Tony?
Well, actually, if I can just
other?
say, if anyone wants to read my writings and actually some inspirational quotes I share,
Okay.
I do have a website called TonyLobl.com.
Okay.
And for listeners, it's TonyLobl.com. tonyLobl.com. So
All
just
right.
8 letters, TonyLobl.com. And my writings are on there. Wherever they've been published, I've collated them on that site. And then there's inspirational quotes.
Is there a logical answer to this question? Why did the Jewish people who were already believing in God need the Messiah to be born among them? Why was that necessary? Why wasn't the Messiah born like here, where there was no there was religion, but it wasn't?
If you want, it's interesting you say that. I mean, Jesus was a great teacher. You know, no matter how much we know our subject, if a better teacher comes along, there's so much more to learn. And Jesus was that teacher who just immaculately knew this God that we're all trying to understand, and showed us, not only in what he said, but what he did, that the nature of this God is love, a love that heals. and so that was just what was needed at that time to progress human thought in that understanding of God. But he did promise a comforter would come. And there are many different ways that is understood by many different sincere Christians. To those of us who study Christian Science, it's funny you should say about what happens here, because the comforter to me is the science that you can read about in Science and Health. It's a science that's in the Bible, but someone had to discover it and bring it to light. So it was how Jesus healed, but it's a analytical explanation, if you like, of how we can step by step learn that process ourselves and begin to heal ourselves
process.
and other. Absolutely, it's not
Physical,
for a few. It's not for a chosen few. Everyone can learn it. It is a science.
Physical healing or just spiritual?
Yeah,
healing?
physical healing. Yes, I can share
wow.
physical healings with you as well. I've had many.
It must be very emotional for you when you give lectures and when you do your writings, because it goes beyond you. You know you're going to touch a lot of lives.
And there's another thing. I'm hoping to touch lives with some sense of the presence of God. And to put yourself in a place where you write and speak for that, you're going to be the first one who feels that love of God. And that, to me, is the beauty of it. I feel that presence, that divine presence of divine love. And thank you, Lord.
The science that Einstein tried to explain about time doesn't change the fact that these interviews always go too quick. Whenever you bring somebody in, every single time, I always look at the clock thinking, can we sometime book these guys for like 3 hours or something?
Can I have 1 30-second thought to say Einstein said, I want to know the mind of God, the rest are details. That's Christian Science.
Nice. Tony Lobl is going to be at the Appleton Museum tomorrow at 2 p.m. and it's a free event presented by the First Church of Christ Scientists. The topic is prayer that transforms us, breakout of boxed-in thinking, featuring Tony Lobl visiting us from London, England.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on board.
Thank you.
Nice to be here again.
Thank you. All right, call us if you need any of that repeated. We'll be glad to do that for you. Do you want to give out the contact for the church?
Well, the contact of the church, the phone number is 352-694-2225, and it's at 209 Southeast 36th Avenue, which is just a block from Fort King and 36th Avenue, Southeast 36th Avenue. So we'd love to see people come.
Yeah, excellent. And this interview will be put up as a podcast on both Facebook and YouTube. If you would like to share it with somebody, maybe you'd like to go and you want to invite a friend, and you say, well, who are we going to see? You can go to this video. You'll be able to share it with that person.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Have a great weekend.
Nice to see you
Enjoy
again.
your visit to Florida.
Yeah, and last point, if anyone wants to find me on Facebook or Twitter, Tony Lobl, Lobl, you'll find me.
LOBL. Thank you for
Thank you.
squeezing that in there. All right, we're up against the break. Let's take that break. We'll be right back. Fun with Joe in about 10 minutes.
This is James Snyder, inviting you to join me each Sunday morning at 9:30 for Sunday Joy on 1370